Our guest today is Aleks Salkin, who is a tremendously successful online health and fitness coach, which, as you know, are some of our favorite conversations. It's never not exciting to hear from a health and wellness pro who's really making a successful mark in the world. Aleks really let us pick his brain on how he built his empire, and he graciously offers up a ton of biz development tips. Please enjoy this productive conversation with a fellow health coach peer, Aleks Salkin. Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio. All right, Aleks Salkin, how are you?
Doing great. And by the way, big ups to you for correctly pronouncing my name. You know, you would think it would be very straightforward, but I get everything from Salkin to Solkin and anything in between. So you nailed it, Salkin. That's plus 10 cool points for
Got it
you.
right on the
By
first
extension,
try.
yes, absolutely. We didn't even like go over this beforehand. You just nailed it. So I'm excited.
I love that. You know, it's a little sidebar. You know, I grew up on in the Northeast, where everybody has some sort of ethnic-ish name, and so you kind of learn to see these patterns and pronunciations. And then I moved out to the Midwest, where it's just not that it's not diverse, it can be, but for whatever reason, people just butcher last names left and right in the Midwest. So I credit my Northeast coast. Everybody's got we're immigrants from everywhere, and everybody's got a different sounding last name, and you just learn to embrace it. So
that's fantastic. And that's why probably so many people have butchered my last name, because I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
See,
like the most middle Midwest, so yeah, that was a fact of life.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Okay, so now we know you grew up there. Explain to our audience who you are. Give us like your origin story, your little, yeah.
I should have worn my Superman suit or something like that to, give a proper superhero origin story. But basically, I have kind of a strange origin story for somebody who has made his career as a trainer and now a coach online as well, because I grew up like the complete opposite of superheroic. Let's say I was scrawny. I was extremely unathletic. I would say pretty weak. And, I was always really interested in physical activity. And I did like gymnastics as a little kid, which I think did help me later on. But at the time, like it didn't do much for my coordination. I liked to play outside. My parents would always, push me to go outside, go play with your friends, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I grew up at a time where it was sort of like the very tail end of when people would do that. It's like when the lights come on, that's when you're supposed to come home for dinner, but get out of the house, go, do your thing. And, but I didn't have any of these like natural athletic qualities that I think a lot of my colleagues do, which is something that I think brought them into personal training because they just had a passion for it for themselves. And then they made that their career. Now, I think that that's fraught with a little bit of danger, which we'll, I'm sure, talk about in a bit. But that was essentially it, is that I was very eager to be, like Batman or like Spider-Man or these other superheroes that I love, but very much didn't resemble them, and which I guess in retrospect is good because, Batman lost his parents and Spider-Man got bitten by a horrible spider. So I can't complain, but I was, mostly picked pretty close to last for team sports, all throughout elementary, middle, and high school. One particularly embarrassing incident that I often recall is that this was like junior year in it was gym class. We did like weight training once or twice a week with, in retrospect, like really very little actual instruction. It was like you get underneath the bar, you lower it to your chest, and then you push it back up. So very straightforward when it's an empty bar or whatever the case may be. But for whatever reason, I was paired with like the most athletic dude in the class. He was on the football team. He was just, like great genetics for everything, tall, just naturally muscular. And we were pressing what was probably a very light amount of weight. I don't remember what it was. I would bet it was the equivalent of like a broomstick with a bagel on each end, like super light. So much so that my partner did not seem to see fit to really spot me, because he's like, oh, he's got this, like somebody with polio could probably press this. Well, I lowered it to my chest, okay, and I could not press it back up. This was a bench press, right? And I peeked over, and he was chatting with one of his friends over at the dumbbell rack, and I was very shy, very timid, so I just kind of rolled it down my chest onto my hips, and then I moved it onto the floor. And then our gym teacher, a guy named Mr. Chavez, like terrifying human being, always very nice to me, but like just terrifying to everybody else, shouted at him, and he's like, you're supposed to be spotting him. What are you doing? And everybody looked over at us, and even though they were ostensibly looking at Erin, Erin was my partner. They were also kind of looking at me, and it was like, and then of course the weight that Erin had to pick up and put back on the rack, which I assume he did with both hands, but he probably really didn't need to. And I was just humiliated, and Aaron's face turned very red, but I don't even know if he would remember that to this day. I have no clue what he's up to, but I remember it very vividly, because I was just so ashamed of like how little I could actually lift and how weak I was and all this other stuff. And even though I kind of started to get a little bit of skill in sports, toward the end, like junior year was the last year I had to take PE, as I recall. And I remember being good at badminton, which was remarkable, like particularly because I didn't know it was an Olympic sport. I thought it was just a gym class sport. And so I was like, that's great. I can do 2-on-1 and like smoke these people in badminton, but who cares? If I had known it was an Olympic sport, I might have like begged my parents, like, this is my only chance to be, athletic. Would you please invest in like some lessons or whatever? So you could be speaking to a gold medalist at this point, as opposed to a could have been, which is essentially what the situation is now. And then we had a game called mat ball, which for some reason I was good at. It was like kind of like baseball, except for like you just stayed on the bases until you got out, I suppose. Or
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually is not an Olympic sport, in case anybody's not sure. And but that was the last year. So it was like right as I was kind of starting to get a little bit better, they were like, okay, you don't have to take gym anymore. And there you have it. So, but I now I was intrigued. I was like, okay, so maybe there is hope for me, and I want to know what it is that I can do. And I would, periodically lift weights for a little bit, and do some other activities, or I would go on runs and stuff like that. And then in 2006, I got introduced to Muay Thai, which is very popular. At the time was like still quite underground, because UFC was not the phenomenon that it is now. But my friend Trevor found this movie called Ong Bak, the Thai Warrior, starring the guy who was ostensibly supposed to be like the next Bruce Lee, but he kind of just remained a martial arts movie staple. He's, I don't think he really made it beyond that. And we were just like enamored. We would just watch this movie all the time. Trevor worked at Walmart, so he would throw like elbows and flying knees into the produce boxes, because he was a produce guy. And I had no such job, so I kind of had to, like behave myself. I worked at a fast food restaurant. There was just not as much stuff to, destroy with your limbs. And but we started taking classes at the gym of a guy who was a 2-time world kickboxing champion.
Wow.
And we were enamored. We loved it. He ended up dropping out because he had a shoulder problem that he got in judo. He took judo classes at the university, which remarkably you could do. I had no clue, but I don't know if he passed or failed given his shoulder issue. But at any rate, he had to slowly leave Muay Thai. But I was still very interested, and so I started off kind of like parlaying my then budding interest in physical activity and athleticism into martial arts. And then at some point along the way, I was in university Spanish classes with somebody that I had gone to middle and high school with and did not get along with, a guy named Drew Christensen.
Ooh.
But for whatever reason, it was just like all that previous animosity just melted away. It was like we're in a university now, so let the past be the past. And before classes, I would always get there about like maybe like 40, we'll say like 15 minutes before class would start. And Drew had discovered this guy named Pavel and this thing called the kettlebell. And I had heard of kettlebells because there's a very oblique reference to them in a book by a guy named John Little on Bruce Lee's training. And it's like, blink and you miss it. There are no pictures. There's just a vague description of how Bruce Lee did kettlebell training back in the 60s. And I think the type of kettlebell that they mentioned is actually an attachment that you'd put on a dumbbell. So you'd
Oh,
give like an
okay.
extra handle and you could do, you know,
Oh, yeah.
ballistic movements and stuff. And so anyway, I was like, okay, Bruce Lee used them, so I know they're legit. I have no clue what they look like because this was all in, you know, there were no pictures of it. And so he brought in a copy of one of Pavel's books, and I was like, that's a very weird looking weight, but this guy looks like a very serious dude who's a Spetsnaz or former Soviet Special Forces trainer. And so I was kind of like, okay, it's interesting, but I wasn't like drawn to it until Drew called me over one day, and he called me up. This was back when millennials were not afraid to answer the phone. So I picked up the phone, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" And it was like an afternoon. It was probably late March or early April of 2008. And I said, nothing. He said, do you want to come over and try a kettlebell workout? And to this day, I really don't know why, because previously I was not chomping at the bit to do it like I was Muay Thai, but I was like, sure. So went over to his house. He showed me these moves, and I wish we had video footage because I am sure that the technique is like cringeworthy. It has to have been. It was like,
Always is in the beginning.
oh yeah, well, he learned from a book. You know, I don't even think he had the DVD, so it's like he was approximating essentially what it was supposed to be. But even though I was performing everything very poorly because, you know, my coordination skills had room for improvement, let's say, I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what strength training is supposed to be. And this was like, it really felt like it filled a missing piece to my training that I had done up to that point, which was mostly, you know, like the muscle and fitness magazine, you know, type of stuff. And so he loaned me a kettlebell. This is like, you know, how far we got beyond that animosity. Okay. Loaned me a kettlebell and both of Pavel's books that he owned. And yeah, it's like the equivalent of jumping on a grenade for your pal. Only in this case, the grenade is weakness, you know, and the jumping is just loaning him the tools necessary to fix it. So I started training with these things. I returned the kettlebell to him eventually, but I kept the books and I bought him new copies because I had just flipped through them so many times that the status of the books was not the way that he left me with them. And so I was like, I'm going to give you brand new copies because it was the least I could do, you know, after having run through them so much. And then from there, it's kind of been a whirlwind. I mean, it was like 2 years after that, I ended up going and becoming a certified instructor under Pavel. And in little bits and pieces, I kind of started training people until I realized, you know what, this is what I really want to do with my life. Previously, my degree of all things is in English writing and linguistics. It is not, you know, in kinesiology, exercise science, like you might otherwise suppose. And I decided that my life was going to be better dedicated to helping people who were just like me, who had struggled for years, maybe decades, to try to find something that really, you know, really stuck with them, and help see them through this morass of very contradictory and confusing information in the fitness world, as opposed to the other alternative, which would have been writing articles about linguistics for journals that nobody reads. And to me, it was a pretty obvious next step. And so I jumped in, never looked back.
You know, really cool story, fun story. I like hearing a story of a fitness guy who wasn't a naturally gifted athlete, right? I think a lot of health coaches that are kind of in the fitness space, especially men, which is something I can't speak to, but think, you know, I need to be this sort of impressive guy, you know, so that men can be, my male clients ostensibly can be impressed by me. So it's always nice to hear a story of like a regular person who grew up to like appreciate or find a section of the fitness and wellness world to appreciate, and to have your own success through whatever that looks like. It's not always about becoming some, you know, majorly jacked dude. I don't know if you're jacked. I can't tell. We're not judging here.
That's why that's why it's just the bust that you see here.
The very last part of your origin story there was this idea of like, you've dedicated your life to helping people just like you, to help see them through the confusing and contradictory info in the fitness world, which is the understatement of the century. Kettlebells, are they easy? And if so, why are kettlebells easy? Or is kettlebell just a proxy for a system to focus in on? Here's just one, you know, is it just that it's a proxy? We're going to give you one thing to focus on. Or is it something specifically simple, easy, gettable, about kettlebells that you think really draws in this crowd of people who are feeling bewildered and overwhelmed?
It's a very good question. I think that the answer is yes and no, because when we think of easy, we'll say on the physical side of things, I would say no, but I would also remind people that if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. And people have a tendency to kind of go toward the path of least resistance. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the right option for them if they want to improve themselves. But if we're talking about easy in terms of its effectiveness, ability to learn relatively quickly, and convenience, because that's one of the big things that people really kind of flock to, then absolutely. Because one of the great things about the kettlebell is with, like, Dan John is a very famous kettlebell instructor. Of course, he's best known, I think, for the fact that he's like a master's in the weight pentathlon and a lifelong track and field athlete. Said once that with this kettlebell in my bedroom, I can train for the nationals. And he was introduced to the kettlebell many, many moons ago, long before I was. And he too was very struck by just how effective it was for a lot of the things that he wanted to do. And I think one of the things that really draws people to the kettlebell, even if they've never yet touched one or even experienced what a kettlebell workout is like, is that there's something very, I hesitate to use the term because it's very overused, but there's something very primal about it. It's a big, ugly, awkward piece of weight, and you have to move it through free space. Whereas if you look at the barbell, which I like a lot, I think a barbell is a great tool. The barbell is a lot less forgiving. And this is something too that a lot of barbell enthusiasts will be the first to tell you, is that you kind of have to be ready to use the barbell. You don't use the barbell to get ready. I am sure there are plenty of people who will disagree, but it is a very, like I mentioned, unforgiving instrument. Like Mark Rifkind, who's a retired master kettlebell instructor, was also a champion powerlifter. He was a coach for the U.S. women's powerlifting team back in, I want to say, like the late 90s. He said that the bar always wins because you can always add more weight, but eventually the bar is going to have a tendency to want to break you. My own personal experience with barbells is that there are some movements that I think are a little bit easier for most people to pick up and maybe less likely to give you a risk of injury. But then there are other things that are like, if you have serious imbalances, the barbell is just not a good option for you. Like if, let's say you're trying to bench press and you've got some really impressive strength on, let's say, the right side of your body, and then on the left side, you need some work. So if you're pressing that 60% on one side, 40 on the other, and you keep adding weight, something eventually is going to break. And it's not always immediately apparent because you don't really have the ability to work one side over the other. I think that people are a bit intimidated by barbells and dumbbells for this reason. I think the inconvenience of them, because unless you want to invest in a couple 100 pounds of weight and be a whole rack of dumbbells, and your spouse is going to allow you to fill up the basement or the garage or anything else, your only other option is to go to the gym. And if you're asking people to only go to the gym to be fit, it's a losing proposition for many, because it's a commute. It's a whole new thing they have to add to their schedule. It's really not very convenient. It'd be like, any personal trainer would tell you, well, exercise is a lot like brushing your teeth. It's like, okay, well, do you go to the dentist every time you need to brush your teeth? Do you know what I mean? Or do you go to some faraway place to do it? No, you do it at home, and you're able to take care of your most of your dental health needs, save for maybe a few times a year when you go to get a cleaning or a checkup or whatever the case may be. So in terms of convenience, I think kettlebell wins hands down. Kettlebell and calisthenics, I would include that in there. And now that's not to say that there are no let's say speed bumps with the kettlebell, because you very well may have physical issues such as the asymmetries or imbalances that I brought up earlier, which might make stuff like, let's say, doing kettlebell swings might be the sort of a thing you'd want to put off until you can get that sort of a thing fixed. But generally, the kettlebell moves around your body rather than demanding that you move your body around it. So that's one of the reasons why I think so many people are drawn to it. I think also the fact that it's like a gym in one hand. You've got strength, you've got conditioning, you've got power, you've got mobility, and you can build up all these things with a relatively light weight, and then watch as that transfers over into, whether it's a game of pickup basketball, maybe you head to the gym once in a while and just see how your traditional lifts are looking. Or like for most people, what's most important is being able to keep up with their kids or their grandkids it's like it hits a home run out of the ballpark every time. So easy in terms of use. I would say it's easy to learn. It's easy to make a part of your repertoire for your day-to-day activities. Easy to make it something that you add to your training, but naturally, like anything in terms of the actual physical exertion that is required, no, it's not easy. But if it were easy, everyone would be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing with a kettlebell is that it's like you could have one kettlebell, by the way, which is what I got during the lockdowns. I was like, oh no, I got the only one I could get was a 45-pound kettlebell, which,
Yeah.
you know, I can row it, I can swing it. There's not much else. But with one kettlebell, which you can tuck in the corner, you could really do like, I love the idea that this, the kettlebell, for some reason, and you're right, it is a tool in fitness that allows you to target so many different components of fitness, more than barbells for sure. Again, you got the strength, power, mobility, endurance piece. Dumbbells I've always been a fan of. So I maybe later we can talk about how dumbbells and kettlebells maybe aren't that different, but we don't want to get into the weeds of that just yet. So yeah, but from the perspective of, I love your analogy of the dentist and the brushing your teeth. It's just like brushing your teeth. Yeah, I do it at home, and I can do it with, like, in my spare moments of my time. It's not like this major endeavor, like driving to the gym. Something about this doableness is what really makes a program sustainable. I was chatting about that with a peer of mine today. That's what good coaching programs are: sustainable. They teach people how to sustain them. And so the simplicity is probably what makes it sustainable for people.
Agreed. Big time. I think this is a big part of the issue, is that I think a lot of people, when it comes to staying consistent, their supposition is that, okay, well, I need something that's going to get more advanced as time goes on. And there is absolutely a place for advanced training, advanced programming, advanced techniques. I think all these things are good. I don't actually like the perpetual beginner's mindset. I think it's not the end of the world to have it, but if you're a beginner, you're in a very different position than if you get to intermediate and advanced. So sometimes it does make sense to upgrade all those things. But most people underestimate just how far they can get with simple programming, to the point where you can even revisit it once you get into intermediate or advanced. It's not that once you get to those levels that now everything has to be complicated and you need an Excel spreadsheet to figure out how many sets and reps and the exact number of ounces, in the weights that you're using and things like that. But these are all things that people, once they start to experience, they're like, wow, I'm doing a really simple program and I look better, I feel better, I'm sleeping better, doesn't hurt my back when I pick up my 2-year-old anymore. And so those early wins that they see on their board are what are going to help keep them consistent. And from there, it's a lot easier to say, hey, why don't we try this? It's a little bit more complex than what we did before, but you've got the consistency down pat. I think you're going to be ready for it. And that's the thing a lot of people miss.
I owned a gym for a number of years and we got shut down due to the pandemic. And so in order to maintain our membership base, we basically lent out all of our equipment. Our members were able to come in and sign out the equipment they wanted and took it home. And then we had to turn around and program every day that was agnostic in terms of, we had to have a body weight version and what if, so that was a hassle, but boy, did I learn a lot about programming. But kettlebells, everyone at first thought they wanted the barbell. But the problem is you need a lot of space, and it's not nearly as convenient. The kettlebells, I think, ended up being the most, it can be utilized in so many different ways. And what I love about, they're phenomenal for a pure strength workout. They're phenomenal for a HIIT workout. They're phenomenal to just throw on in terms of load. I'm walking, maybe I'm working with some proprioception work. You can use it as an anchor for so many. There's so much you can do with them. And to your point, Erin mentioned it too, you don't need the entire suite of weights. You need, one you could certainly get by with, but if you had, just 2 or 3, you're good. Mm-hmm. And there's so much you can do with them. So I'd like to dive into a little bit. So is this then the crux of your fitness business, as a kettlebell-centered program? I heard you say it's mostly online. Do you mind telling us a little bit about, I guess, what your online business is about and yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So give us some more detail.
So yeah, number one, I would say the kettlebell absolutely plays a central role. And to expand on that, it's specifically the kettlebells, bodyweight exercises, and then natural human movement, specifically through things like the original strength resets, which are a series of movements based on what's called the human developmental sequence. So have you ever seen a little kid or little baby going from, just kind of, he or she is on her back, just kind of hanging out, to being able to start to roll and then rock and then crawl and eventually stand up? These are all the movements that form the foundation for all the more advanced stuff that we do. So kind of like how I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of like the perpetual beginner's mindset. I think you need to be able to stack beginner skills into intermediate and into advanced. It's every bit as important also to make sure that those basics, both of the traditional strength movement patterns that we know and love, like push, pull, hinge, squat, gate, lunge, and twist, being able to work on the foundation of those as well, which is found in stuff like deep breathing, head control, rolling, rocking, crawling, and another gait pattern exercises, makes a huge, huge difference in people's fitness. And so it's based around, I would say, those three things, with also imbued with some, let's say, direct, focused in-between work, I like to call it. So stuff that is like, let's say, isolation exercises, like what you might find in bodybuilding, and, things like shoulder external rotations for the rotator cuff, other natural movement patterns like hanging and loaded carries and things of that nature. That's essentially the crux of the business in terms of the tools and methods that I use. But then the business itself is very email marketing driven. So I have all the major social media accounts, with the exception of TikTok, because I feel that I get spied on enough by Facebook. I don't need to get spied on by other companies. But it is, for the online side of things, largely information products. So I have different courses, programs, challenges, guides, things like that. Anything that is the sort of a thing that I think is going to help people in their journey to getting better, stronger, generally fitter, all the way to getting something very, very specific, like how to increase your kettlebell snatch technique, or how to improve it, how to do more snatches. So from general to specific, again, it's mostly information product based, but I also do have consulting, coaching, and other things of that nature.
I love that. You've taken us through sort of from your programming to your the sort of the layout of your online business. That's cool, because that's kind of how Laura queued up the question. So from my perspective, like, I consider programming to be its own little silo. This is the programming. So for you, it's the kettlebells, bodyweight stuff, natural human movements. Do you have so is there a set protocol that everybody goes through, or is this personalized? What's the programming like? Keto, carnivore, paleo, AIP, SCD, low FODMAP, so many diets, so much confusion. And if health coaches are having a hard time keeping up, imagine how clients must feel. To make sense of it all, Primal Health Coach Institute partnered with registered dietitian and health coach Martha Tettenborn to create a comprehensive functional therapeutic diet specialist certification. This flexible online course dives deep into the many different types of therapeutic diets. You'll learn the purpose of each of these diets and how to help your clients map out a nutritional plan to resolve their specific health issues. As a certified functional therapeutic diet specialist, you'll help people reach a deeper understanding of food as medicine and transform their lives for the better. Find out more at primalhealthcoach.com.
Very good question. It really depends on a number of things. So for instance, if somebody writes to me and they say, hey, I'm trying to achieve X, Y, and Z, like I've had people say, I want to do the Strong First kettlebell certification or the level 2. So, can you help me? Because there's something like that, I think, is the sort of a thing that needs a much more specific to that, or individualized protocol. So, as it is now, I don't have any sort of like generalized protocol for that. So if somebody reaches out, I will do programming for them. And that really all depends on exactly what they need. And it really varies in terms of what I might give them. Just to give you an example, I had a gal named Shannon reached out to me maybe about 5 years ago. She was getting ready to do her level 2 recertification. And a problem that she always encountered was that her shoulders she would always end up going in injured. And part of it was shoulder problems. And what I found out was that she worked at, even though she had a level 2 certification, that was like a passion for her. Her main job was that she owned a house cleaning business. So she's cleaning multiple houses every single day. That's a lot of use of your upper body, a lot of use of the shoulders. And she had been given, some very generic advice previously, like once a week, do 300 reps of the snatch with your snatch test weight, no matter how long it takes. And anybody who doesn't know, the snatch test with the kettlebell, so a kettlebell snatch is where you would swing a kettlebell between the knees, and then in a smooth and momentum-based movement, you'd bring it overhead, and then you pause briefly with the kettlebell overhead, and then you repeat. And so ladies have to do that with anywhere between 12 and 16 kilos, depending on their weight class. So if they're very light, they can use 12 kilos, but 12 kilos is about 26 pounds, 16 is about 35 pounds. Gentlemen have to do it with 53 pounds or 24 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would always have all these shoulder problems. So I said, okay, I'm gonna write you something that is not going to have these problems. Let's make it a little bit more individualized to you. So what I had her do is the main movement for her overhead strength was a Turkish get-up, and I would waive the amount of weight that she would use. It was just a 3-day-a-week program. Likewise with swings, with squats, we also included rows. And then I told her to grease what's called greasing the groove with push-ups. So if anybody's not familiar with the term, greasing the groove just means that you practice a very brief and very focused sets throughout the day with a very, very sub-maximal amount of reps or amount of weight. So to give you an example, let's say she could do 10 reps. She wouldn't do any more than between 2 and 5 reps in a set, and the focus would be on making them perfect. Like as though, we'll say the president of push-ups showed up and was like, I want to see a set. I don't care how many you do, but they better look perfect. That is the kind of that's the kind of work she would do. The reason I chose push-ups is because they have a reputation for being a bit easier on people's shoulders, and she was already doing overhead work with the Turkish get-up. And I have found that doing Turkish get-ups and then also push-ups in a program has a tendency to increase the amount of weight that you can press. So you've got weight stacked overhead, and then you're also building up strength in assistance muscle groups like the triceps and the chest. And of course, the shoulders come into play as well. And so it worked out very well for her, such that when the time came, I was able to get her doing snatches. We only had her snatch once a week with just a heavier weight than what she was going to test with. And I'm just kind of giving you the overview, so I'm not going to get into the sets and reps because off the top of my head, I don't recall them. But she went through the SFG2 and had no pain, no shoulder problems, no injuries, and even got rave reviews from her team leader and the assistants. And a case like that does require much more individualized programming. Otherwise, and this is where my information products come into play, if there's a particular theme that people are looking for, like, as of the time of our recording, we're recording in spooky season, right in the middle of it.
Yep.
We're in Halloween. And right around in November, I have a program that I sell for people who are interested in making sure that all the excess calories they're taking in from, the kids' Halloween candy that they're stealing with the mom or dad tax, to the Thanksgiving dinner, to Christmas dinner, and everything in between, that they can put that to good use and turn it into muscle instead of just, the extra 5 to however many pounds people put on. So I have a program, it's a kettlebell program based on building muscle called Gainsgiving. I'm a big fan of plays on words, so a lot of my programs have silly names like that. And the idea is that it's kind of a beginner's program for building muscle, and it's very different from what most people are used to who come to me, because they're used to kind of lower rep sets, and this is more moderate reps for the most part, anywhere from 8 to 12 to 20 plus reps per set. And so the general theme is that this is what you're going to do if you don't want to stop indulging over the holidays. I'm not encouraging people to go ham, as it were, but I'm also not trying to say, oh yeah, on Thanksgiving, instead of having a piece of pumpkin pie, you could just eat a little bit more cranberry sauce. Like, nobody wants to hear that. So you want to have something where they can be like, okay, I can still train, I can still eat the way that I want to, I can still spend time with my family, and I can do it without guilt. So that's a more general program that's got, particular exercises, particular set and rep schemes, and then you fill in the blanks in terms of how long you need to rest in between, and how much weight you're using. And so that's perfect for people who are in a situation that a lot of people are going to find themselves in, similar with some of the other programs that I have. So it really all depends on exactly what it is they're going for. If they need something really specific, like, training for certification, or just, hey, I want to do, I can do 5 pull-ups and I want to work my way up to 10 or 15 or something like that. They might reach out to me to do their programming for them. Otherwise, if they have something that I already have something written up for, then I might refer them to that and say, hey, it's going to be a little bit more cost effective for you, and this is a proven program. Here are some of the testimonials for people who have done it, and you can always reach out if you have questions or anything like that. But that's essentially it. It's largely focused on information products, with the other side being consulting and coaching.
Got you.
So okay, I want to hear all about these information products, but I know people listening, as we were talking before we hit record, the various stages many of our listeners are in. You have various information products, which I assume are kind of pre-built programs designed to accomplish something specific for a niche beginner or whatever. Okay. Where did you start? What was your first program and why did you build it? Who were you building it for? And how did people find that program? Because I heard you say you do, it's very email marketing driven. And this is the number one question we get is, how am I going to find clients? Who's going to find, and Erin and I are like, how are they going to find you? Let's change the mindset there. But I would love to know where you started. What was your first program designed to do? How did you sell it? And then from there, how did you determine what the next program should be and so on?
Very good question. So my first steps are not the first steps that I would recommend anybody else to take, but
okay.
Not because it couldn't work, but because it's generally just a little bit harder. And I'll explain what I mean. So first and foremost, I had and then still have, social media presence. And so now, back in the day, you probably remember this, in like we'll say the mid 2000s, it was a bit easier to get more people to like your Facebook page and follow you on Instagram and stuff like that. There's a reason why these companies make it a little more challenging. We won't go into it now, but suffice it to say, it's still useful to have all these things. But people are always very worried about the email marketing thing because it doesn't really seem like there's a blueprint for it. I would say that to some degree that's true, because the sales process is already the blueprint. And essentially what you have to do if you're going to go from social media, which is free and accessible by pretty much anybody, to something like email marketing, there are, we'll say, tactics and strategies that help, but you have to understand principles of selling. Very straightforward. We can cover them right now, or momentarily anyway, because I want to make sure I first answer your question. So what I started with was, I already had a habit of doing daily or near daily posts on Facebook, for instance, and eventually I turned Instagram into a method for that, and then much later also YouTube. So, and LinkedIn, by the way, LinkedIn's another very good option. So what you're going to want to do first is, if you already have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever the case may be, is you can utilize that to build your email list. And so the people will often ask, well, how do I find people? And you said something great. You want them to find you. And that is really the essence of what marketing maestro Dan Kennedy calls magnetic marketing. You want to magnetically attract the people that you are uniquely and particularly able to help and are able to connect with. So for instance, I don't do athletic coaching, meaning I don't train kids to get on, the varsity team or the JV or whatever the case may be, because I just don't understand it. I've never had any connection with it. Again, my origin story was I was sort of a geek. On the other hand, I have a friend in Pennsylvania, Rob Akers, who is great at that. And he has a gym, and he almost exclusively works with high school athletes, and he does a great job. He works with other people too, but that's his niche. He's great with that. He knows how to help them, and he helps them in abundance. Me, I don't get it, so I don't really deal with it. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is figure out, I like to call that the 3 knows. You have to know thyself, you have to know thy skills and abilities, and then know thy audience, or know who it is that you can help. And the first thing about knowing yourself, we just kind of covered. I know that I don't know anything about, helping people who are trying to get into onto like a select team and whatever the case may be. But I do understand people who are like me, people who are very interested in strength training and getting fitter and stronger and wanting to do so for health purposes, not for the purposes of competing, let's say. And primarily men. I do have female clients. I do have women who like my programs, but generally I think men tend to like what I do a little bit more because maybe they can see more of themselves in me. So that's the other thing is like I welcome when women come to me to learn and to get stronger, but it's not my specialty. So they're mostly the ones who maybe like my sense of humor, maybe my haircut. I don't know. But they also see, okay, this guy knows a thing or two, so we'll follow him. So that's number one. I understand the people that I can help the best and the people who are most likely to want to accept my help. And then I know, so you've got know thyself, know thy audience, and then know thy skills. So my skills are particularly in kettlebells, calisthenics, and natural human movement. I know how to lift barbells. I know how to train with dumbbells. To some degree, I even know how to program with these implements, but I'm not really passionate about them. And I don't have the depth of knowledge with them that others do. So when people come to me and they say, I've had this happen. People are like, I want to bring up my deadlift. I'm like, I can't help you. I could maybe, but I can't guarantee you that if you sign up for a program with me that it's going to change much of anything, because there are intricacies necessary to understand in order to get to that far. So I will send them to somebody different. That's the other thing, is you have to be willing to send people away. Another one, and this may surprise people, is I do almost nothing with fat loss. So, and I'm not saying other people should do this, but I know the basics of it. I know the ins and outs. For instance, you got to burn more calories than you take in. You need to be in calorie deficit, as it's known, to some degree or another. But the matter of coaching it is something I just don't understand. And so people have come to me and saying, hey, can you help me to get leaner, or whatever the case may be? And I say, maybe, but I can't take your money to do that, because I can't promise you that you would get better results than if you were to go to someplace else. So those are the first three things that you have to do before anything else. Even before you get to the sales process, you have to be very clear on the kind of value that you can provide, the kind of people that you can help, and the kind of things that you can do for those people. And once you know those things, it makes the next stages far, far easier.
That's awesome. I think that an interesting exercise that coaches could do when they're not even just starting out in business, but looking to grow, or as we all are, improve our business, get more clarity on, get greater results for a more clear audience. Anyway, one of the exercises that we could do, I think is useful, is who don't I help?
Yeah.
Like, for a lot of folks, we try to get our students in our school to say, what's your area of expertise? Kind of know thyself. What are you the expert in? And I always encourage students to declare themselves, at least in-house, declare yourself an expert. You don't have to put that out there if that feels impostery for you, but what are you an expert in? And everybody struggles with that. And because the next follow-up question is like, what problem can you specifically solve, and for who? And people get a little nebulous with that. Well, I can help women and men, and I can help old people and young people, and I can help trained and untrained. It's like, it just gets a little vague. So it's like, well, let's look at who you don't help. Who can you absolutely not help? And just like go crazy with it. I don't help kids. I don't help people trying to achieve, performance outcomes. I don't help people who are pregnant. You can go really obvious with it, but it's going to help you clarify who you do help. I honestly think this is a pretty cool exercise to go through all three of those categories. Who am I and who am I not? What do I know? What do I don't know? Who can I help and who can I not help? Mm-hmm. That just really helps you crystallize your message a little bit.
Bingo. And I would say, also because, I was going into this a little bit earlier, I stopped short, but I would think now is a good time to mention it too, is know what your skills are. You can do the exact same thing. What skills do I have and what skills do I not have? So I was joking with you gals earlier that I'm like a caveman with a computer. Remarkably, I have an online business in spite of that, but it's because I know the basics of what I need to do. And in particular, I would say I'm reasonably good at other things that allow me to make it an internet-driven business. And but for instance, I think I'm pretty good on camera. I think I'm pretty good on the audio side of things, but I think that I'm best able to help people with written material. So my information products are all very heavily writing based, and that's because then the people who are attracted to that are more likely to, kind of filter their way in, and people who don't want that will filter their way out. And of course, I include video demonstrations and breakdowns of technique and stuff like that. But other people might find an audio course would be better, or a video course. It's the same with my opt-in for my website. We can talk about opt-ins in a moment, but my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, there is a video component, but it's largely just writing. And so people see that. And if they're like, I don't want to read all this, then they just naturally filter themselves out and they find somebody who's going to be better able to help them. And that's the key, is that I don't want them to live in darkness. I want them to find somebody who they're going to resonate with better. And so naturally, the people who come to me, they like to read, which is good because I like to read, I like to write. So even on a deeper level, just beyond the skills that I have, you can also connect with people with the skills that you have. You're going to find people who just love watching videos and they want to follow along workout. Maybe that's going to be better for you. This is why I think the first exercise, like what you pointed out, is like what I am and what I'm not for those different categories is really mission critical, because even if you don't get 100% clarity, if you go from, like, let's say 20% clarity to 80%, and then as time goes on, you're able to clarify more and more and more, you're going to be light years ahead of the game, because you're not going to be taking steps in the wrong direction. You're going to be taking steps in the right direction, and then you can just recalibrate as needed.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So how long did it take you to get comfortable? I've heard you say this a few times. Those people are just going to filter themselves out. Or I'm really not the guy to kind of move your max deadlift up by 20 pounds. That's not what I do. And here's who you should go to. I think a lot of health coaches, when they first start, are afraid to say no to a client. And look, and if you're there as a health coach, I'm not, this is a natural part of the process, I think. And sometimes you realize the negative aspect of taking on a client is not in your wheelhouse. You kind of learn why when you do take them on. But did you sort of always have that point of view, or did you kind of learn? How long did it take you to get comfortable to be like, I'm not your guy?
I have a very overactive imagination, so it was very easy for me to imagine accidentally hurting a client. And very early, I remember there was a gal. I used to do a corporate fitness program at a local TV station in Omaha, Nebraska. And there was a lady who came in. I don't remember what department she worked for. She was not one of the TV journalists, but she worked in maybe accounts receivable, let's say. I have no idea. But she was coming in to do like a first lesson. And I said, okay, we're going to learn the kettlebell deadlift first. She's going to learn how to pick up the kettlebell. And then after that, we're going to turn that into the swing and so on and so forth. So she started deadlifting the kettlebell, and her pelvis was like a ship, on a wave, kind of like, and I was like, man, it was just completely off. There was one side way higher than the other, not minor at all. It was super visible. And so I thought maybe it's a technique issue. So I said, hey, let's tweak this. Let's change that. Didn't change anything. So I stopped the lesson. I said, I would really love to be able to help you, but I think you need to see a specialist about getting your pelvis better aligned, because if I teach you how to do a swing, you're almost certainly going to hurt your back.
Yeah.
And she actually did. She took my advice. Sometimes you're going to find, when you send people away, they're out of your hands. So it's good to know good chiropractors and physical therapists and doctors and things like that, so that you can send them. But whether or not they contact them is a completely different matter. But so I would say early on, I got used to that, in the sense of, like, if this really needs to be referred out, I'm just not gonna deal with it. Other times I would take on somebody who was maybe a little bit challenging, because I had people who might. This was later when I developed more skills. I had people who maybe also shouldn't have been swinging a kettlebell, but now I could walk them through the human developmental sequence, like what I'd learned with original strength. And so I was actually able to help them. And then we would do stuff like deadlifts, and then work into swings and things of that nature. And if the time came where they needed to see a PT instead of me, I would just say, hey, go see so-and-so. He or she's going to be able to help you better than I can. And then come back to me when you get cleared to start exercising again. It is really hard to do it initially, because it feels like you're just throwing money away, but it is a lot cheaper than, whatever it is you're going to have to pay if you injure the person and they decide to sue you. And this is an extreme example, obviously, but I think at a minimum, you should be comfortable doing that. So I would say it was within probably the first year or two when I discovered, when I was put in such a situation where I actually did need to refer out. And now I also refer out, even if it's something like somebody says, I want to lose 20 pounds.
Right.
And I would say, okay, if that's like a secondary goal, then I can take you on, because that's not really what I primarily focus on. But if that's your number one goal, I think you should see so-and-so, because he or she is better at that. And I think that you'll get better results from whoever that may be, as opposed to me. But yeah, I would not encourage people to just toss people away who are going to be a little bit challenging, but rather if they're out of your wheelhouse, you should learn how to get comfortable with that really quickly. And if you're not so sure, take a leap of faith. It'll probably work out for the best.
Yeah, or not. But either way, you would learn.
Absolutely.
But you know, this is a topic that we suggest often, and it's worth repeating and reiterating, which is you don't want to work with everyone.
Yeah.
And you know, in the case of this example, the woman with the crooked pelvis on the deadlift, you know, you clocked right away. If I keep getting her to deadlift this thing, we're going to be in training these biomechanical patterns that are not going to work out for her in the long run. So we're just going to stop this now. Mm-hmm. Great. It might be a personality clash. It might be, you know, you use the example of this person came for fat loss. And I mean, maybe you might accidentally get some fat loss if you build strength, but if that's your number one goal, like for me, I work in fat loss, but not for everybody. Yeah. Oh, you want to squeeze into your size 4s by, you know, your high school reunion, which is in 6 weeks. I can't help you with that. And quite frankly, I don't want to. Yeah. But, you know, I personally, and a lot of coaches, I had to learn that lesson the hard way by taking on a client like that and hating it. Well, not only hating it, but I just couldn't help. And that doesn't feel good. Exactly. So then over time, you start to practice and you start to pick up on the things that are kind of hard no's for you. Mm-hmm. But I really would encourage coaches to start to get clear on that and to just accept what kind of you're saying. What we're always saying is you don't want to help everyone. It's not enjoyable in a lot of ways.
Big time. You know, I think if people, the sooner that people realize that, the sooner they can start having fun, which is going to make it a lot easier to weather the hard times. Right. There's going to be somebody out there who's the 6-week fat loss expert. Send them to him or her. And you know what? Here's the other thing. Make like a deal with that person. Hey, if somebody comes to you and says, look, I want to lose fat, but I've got plenty of time. You know, I don't need to rush into 6 weeks. I know I'm going to quit if I do it. Then have them say, hey, you know what? I know somebody who can help you lose it in 6 months and might be a little bit better fit for you. You know, go see Erin Power. She's going to be way better for that, you know? So that's another thing. And this is something that, again, I think happens over time. You don't need to have a checklist to start it right away. But if you can start networking with professionals who are better for the things that you can't do, whether it's, you know, medical or pain professionals versus fitness professionals who just do something way different, you're going to actually be able to fulfill your mission to help people. Because sometimes you can't help everybody. You can only personally help certain people. But if you can point people who you can't help to somebody who can help them, you're still fulfilling your mission.
Mm-hmm. You know, what's interesting about that is in a lot of cases, it requires you to confront your own biases. Yeah. Right. If I get somebody in my roster who wants to go plant-based, they want to eat less meat.
Send them away. I'm out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it behooves me to know who's out there doing great plant-based nutrition, you know, like
absolutely.
Maybe I'm closed, you know, being closed off to other ways of doing it. You know, I think the way you just articulated it was so nice. I mean, this makes you more able to fulfill your mission. We're all in this to help people. Mm-hmm. If somebody comes in and they're kind of misaligned from your point of view, we can push them away. That's certainly in our we can do that. But wouldn't it be nicer if we could say, well, you're more interested in this approach. Here's somebody who I followed that I trust. Even though I don't agree with them, exactly. I at least trust them.
Exactly. You know, and you can be honest. You can say, listen, personally, I wouldn't recommend that you have a vegan diet because X, Y, and Z. But there are people who have succeeded doing it. I don't know how they did it, but I know that they help people and that, you know, so-and-so is really good at it. So you should go see, you know, Mike Mahler or Melody Schoenfeld. These are both, you know, plant-based people who have a pedigree of really, really being able to help people. And it's like, but if I tried to do it, I'd be like, I didn't even know what you would replace the steak on your plate with. So, but you got to replace it with something. So, you know, yeah, you're better off being, you know, somebody else's project. I don't want to send you in the wrong direction.
Yeah, no, 100%. And quite frankly, if that's not your expertise, to make sure that this person is properly nourished And if you're not a plant-based expert, you don't really understand the food combinations required for the body to actually assimilate these things without what meat brings to the table and all those. You're better off either that, or I have taken on clients who were open-minded. They were currently vegan and they were there because they thought it was healthier for them. If there's a way to remain that way and be healthy, that's a preference, but they're not closed-minded. They're open-minded to it. But I did say, I'm just going to lay out to you why I don't think it's optimal. And as long as you go into making decisions knowing what I can teach you, then great, you can make a decision. And it's only really happened 3 times, and all 3 times they ended up adding in some sort of animal food in a way that was just in line with their own preferences and what they felt comfortable with. Doesn't mean they were bellying up to the all meat, like Brazilian steakhouse, but they added in an eggs, or they could tolerate dairy, or they started adding in fish, or whatever the case may be, and felt a million times better. And that's in my wheelhouse. But you just have to be honest. And I kind of want to take you back a little bit in terms of kind of getting started. And you were talking about starting in social media to kind of build your email list. So and I also wanted to kind of dive a little bit more into, again, from like when you started you have more than one program now. Oftentimes what we hear from many of the people that have been successful or business coaches, they talk about starting with one thing and doing one thing really, really well and selling one thing. And then you learn, to your point, learn more, you take on, and now all of a sudden you've got a second program. Or people start with one-on-one coaching, and then they develop into a group coaching, and then they have an evergreen, so they eventually move on to offering others, but they started with one thing. Where did you start? What was your kind of one thing in terms of appealing to those people that were like you?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I realized that I hadn't answered that earlier. And I was like, I got to try to find a way to go back and actually answer the question. So what I started with is, I had a non-start and then an official start. So my good friend, Pat Flynn, the kettlebell guy, not the smart passive income guy, he was like, Alex, you should really start an email list. You get some great information. I know you'd be able to help a lot of people. So I created like a free report on crawling specifically, and how to use that in your fitness and in your programming and stuff like that. I had a lot of people sign up for it, and then I just never emailed them. So this was like 2014. It was so this is kind of the non-start portion of it. And after a while, I'd collect a lot of these email addresses, and then I decided, I'm going to start up. I created a new free report then, and started collecting email addresses again. And I decided, what, I really want to make it a point to start doing these emails regularly, because I do think that I have something to offer, and I wanted to build up my online business. I just have this tendency to have like a 2-year delay before I do a lot of things. I don't know why, but it's like 2 years always. But it's important to understand that if you make this mistake and you're like, okay, look, I know this is good for me, I know 2 years from now I'm going to be doing it, I should just start now. Well, I've since learned that lesson. But what I started doing was, because I was already doing daily Facebook posts, as an example, that was my primary means of using social media back in those days. With every Facebook post that I would make, I would always include some sort of an encouragement to get my free report. And it was something that, again, it was sort of self-limiting, because it wasn't about barbell training, it wasn't about fat loss, it was about kettlebells and bodyweight training. The two things that at the time I focused on the most. And later I would make, movement as a specific thing, another part of that, so that it's like kind of more of a triangle, let's say. But started collecting the emails, and then I made it a point that at 3 days a week, I was going to send them an email with some great and entertaining information. And eventually I would make a pitch for something. And this is why I said I wouldn't start by doing what I did, because it can be done, because I did it successfully, but for a lot of other people, it's kind of a tall order. So I still have what's called the Inner Circle. So it's my monthly newsletter, a paid newsletter, where there's a new program every month. There's a deep dive into information on some specific topic of how to, get stronger, fitter, and healthier. The format now is a little bit different, because I also show you, here's how to integrate the lessons from this issue into your current programming, even if you're not going to do the program that's contained within this issue. Here's how you can use it. You can still, radically improve your training without interrupting it, but actually, complementing it. And so that's what it was. It was a monthly program that people would sign up for. But like I said, because it's every month, if you're not used to creating like some sort of a monthly program, might be a little bit daunting, and you want something that's going to be successful and something that you're going to be consistent with every bit as much as what you would want one of your clients to do if they were taking on a program. Like, sure, maybe they could go to the gym 5 days a week. Maybe there's nothing physically stopping them from doing it, but are they likely to stop if you create a program that's going to require an hour a day, 5 days a week, starting from zero? You want to set yourself up to succeed in a similar way. So you could put together some sort of a course trying to solve a specific problem. And that's the key, is that any course program, challenge, whatever the case may be, you want it to be something that is designed to solve a problem that your audience is specifically likely to encounter. And because this is a problem, I'm sure you've seen this, is that people have a tendency to create a product and they try to build a bridge from their product to their market, as opposed to building a bridge from the market to their product. And this is a mistake everyone's going to go through at least at some point, because we have like a passion project we just really want to do, and then we try to work backwards to like rationalize why people should buy it, even if it's not really what they care about or asked for. So I've had colleagues, for instance, who maybe had like one ebook, and that was always what their pitch was at the end of their emails, was to get the ebook. And that would probably be an easier way to get started, at least, because once you start to see, you get some early wins on your board, similar to your clients, hey, just show up and do, these basic exercises 3 days a week, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. They start to see some progress. And now they're thinking, oh, well, I wonder if I change my diet, maybe that will help me to see even better results. What if I added a 4th day a week? So naturally, people are going to upgrade what they're willing to do once they have seen some early wins. And it's very much the same for us. We need early wins on the board to make sure that what we're doing is moving us in the right direction. So I had and still have my monthly program, the Inner Circle, or the monthly newsletter, we'll say, the Inner Circle. And it appeals to a specific audience. And then later I decided, okay, maybe I'll sell a back issue as like a separate thing for people who want to get it. And I realized, there's actually quite a bit of interest for people who want to just get one thing and be done with it. So I said, okay, maybe then what I'll do is I will write a program that is not like a monthly thing, but it's like a one-time purchase, and it'll be a course that they can download. And went very well. I decided, okay, maybe, what are some other problems that people have that I have not yet addressed because it just hasn't come up. And then from there, I was able to kind of start thinking about what are what are some standalone products, whether it's a course. I define a course as something that's designed to teach them a skill that they may not yet have. A program is something to utilize the skills they have in a new way that's going to help them, reach a new level of strength and fitness and flexibility. Challenge, something that, and this is my definition, other people don't have to use this. This is not like the industry standard per se. And then a challenge would be something that can be done in 10 minutes or less, and can ostensibly be done either just as a standalone thing, if you don't have a lot of time and you need to just focus on one specific thing, but otherwise is designed to fill some sort of a gap in their physical abilities, their physical fitness, and can be done in conjunction with a course or a program. And then guides are more general. More general focuses on one specific problem. So like I have a guide called the Bulletproof Shoulders Guide, and it's just a collection of, mobility drills, exercises, and things of that nature that I've found have helped people. So it's not a program per se. There's a program in it, but it's really more like here's like a smorgasbord of things that you can choose from, that you can try out and then see what works best for you. So I started to come up with these things because I'd done enough consulting and coaching with people that I knew there were just tons of problems that people had. Or I would hear, even if people didn't ask for something specific, I would hear the other complaints that they had. And I would say, you know what? I know if this person would just do a lot more dead bugs, that would probably fix their problem. And so I drew a bridge between what they wanted, let's say stronger presses, maybe low back that felt better, swings that were more powerful, and the dead bug, which can help to assist in all of those things. So I created a challenge called Dawn of the Dead Bug, which I'm still very proud of. I just, like I said, I like plays on words. And so a lot of my products have these things in there. And it was a hit and people loved it. And they found that it actually was what they needed. So people weren't necessarily like, how can I do dead bugs all the time? Or, for 30 days. But it was something that, because I knew it was going to help a problem that many people had, or maybe even multiple problems that people were encountering, that it was something that would be of interest to them. And sure enough, that was exactly the case. So what I would say, just to sum up, is that obviously you're going to need to have some way to get people onto your email list. You want to provide something of value to them. Again, like a free report is what I've done in the past and even currently, and it works great. If you don't like writing, you're just not really big on writing, then you could do like a video guide. Or let's say you do like writing, but you just know it's going to take a long time and you want to get started off right off the bat. So you can just put together, like, let's say a course, like a video course that walks them through some sort of a problem, an audio course, if it's something that they need to hear and that you're uniquely capable of transmitting through audio. And you can always change it. Like, there's nothing that says you need to use this forever. You can even later sell some of the things that you used to give away for free. Like, I have a 99 kettlebell and bodyweight workouts ebook that used to be my opt-in, and then I was doing a coaching program with Matt Fury, the wise and powerful Matt Fury. For those who are not familiar, he created combat conditioning. He's a stellar guy all around. And I was doing this coaching program with him, and he read through it and he said, you should really be selling this, because this is like great. There's a lot of good information in there. And he said, and there's, nobody's going to be offended that something that you once gave away for free is now for sale, because if it's good, people are going to want to buy it. And he was right. So I get a lot of sales on it now. But you can always change it. So start with something, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, and perfect it later, or switch to something different. Like, you might start to find that as you're going in a particular direction, that moving in a slightly different one, going the same basic way, is going to be the thing that is going to, really transform your business. It's going to transform how you can help others. But you got to get started, because a lot of the way is going to be illuminated by you walking down the path and shining the light to figure out where to go next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of trial and error. I always evoke this metaphor of how many times I balled up the piece of paper and threw it at the waste paper basket as I was making my program. And then I found one that I could kind of hang with for a while. And that one has since been rearranged and readjusted. And what you've kind of described here, like, you just get started with something that you like to talk about anyway, which automatically makes it fun for you. So great, at least you've got that going for you. And if you persevere, which frankly a lot of coaches don't, but if you do, the product suite begins to make itself known to you. Oh, I can add this piece. Oh, I can add this. Oh, I can go to this kind of delivery, whatever, paid thing, a free thing. Like this does evolve over time for everybody, but not if you don't get started.
Exactly. And, not if you don't stick to it too, because I think the statistics, as I've heard them, is that within 18 to 24 months, most personal trainers will end up dropping out, and then they just go to something different. It is very, very challenging. I think one of the things that makes it challenging for people is that, they're trying to turn, I don't want to call it a hobby, because I think that kind of, in some ways, it doesn't really adequately describe what training and that sort of a thing and coaching is really all about. But it takes something that is ostensibly started off as a hobby for you, we'll say that, and it turns it into a business. And so you have to be able to, again, this is like the beginner's mindset sort of a thing. You have to upgrade your mindset at some point or another and say, look, I'm going to have to do things that maybe I'm not comfortable with right off the bat. And, I'm going to have to try things, and I have to be okay with failing, in much the same way that I can unemotionalize my own clients' failures when they try something and fall short. I have to be able to do the same thing myself. And if you really want to be able to help people, you're asking your clients to, upgrade themselves, become a better version of themselves. And many of them have a very hard time visualizing it. They can't, if they've been overweight their whole life, like they can't visualize themselves weighing 50 pounds less. It just seems like not even a fantasy. It's like a pipe dream. So if they see you doing something that you're uncomfortable with and that you struggle with and that you still persevere with, not only is that going to show them, okay, I'm not alone here. He or she struggles with this or that. It's also going to give you better insight into how you can help them, because you're going to be able to say, you know what, when I tried selling my product and only 2 people bought it and I've got 1,000 people on my email list, I just wanted to throw in the towel. But then, what did I learn from that? And how can I turn that into a lesson that I can teach my clients so that they will be able to understand, number one, even if I haven't walked exactly in their shoes, I've walked down the same path, and that I can guide them, because people are going to want to hire you if they know that if they can believe that you're an expert, that you've done it yourself, and that you've helped other people to do it. And if you've never done it yourself, then the rest is like a non-starter.
Agreed. Oh my gosh, this was so great. We could just chew your ear off like the whole day. We love talking about this stuff. And I just love your approach to this and your enthusiasm for it. And I could hear you reaching for hobby's not really the right word. A lot of the times the word we use is passion.
There
right?
we go.
It's a passion. It's a calling. You're drawn to it. How do I actually make a living doing this without totally hating it? And what you're saying about, you said the average trainer kind of gives up 18 to 24 months later. Same thing's true of health coaching. Same thing's true of business coaching. Same thing is true of any business.
Yeah.
Any business, right? If you can make it past year 3, your odds of success are enormously higher by just layers of magnitude. I can't even. So thank you for sharing all your words of wisdom.
My pleasure.
Please, if you don't mind, share with our audience where they can find you and follow you. And I'm sure people are going to want to stalk your programs and kind of see what you developed, use you for some inspiration. So fill us in.
So you can go, I'll tell you a little bit about my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge.
Yeah.
As the name implies, it's just 9 minutes long, and it's designed to be done in conjunction with whatever else it is you're already doing. So it's focused on movements that will take you maybe 30 seconds max to learn how to do. Mm-hmm. Stuff like loaded carries, crawling, and other gait pattern based movements. The gait pattern, or the walking pattern, is like the most natural and fundamental of all human movements. And so what I've done is put together this really basic program that, again, you can bookend your training with, either at the beginning or the end. You can do it on your off days. But the movements in it are designed to help you to better connect your body from top to bottom, improve your strength, your stamina, even your coordination. I found, again, believe it or not, I could barely walk and chew gum at one point, and now no problem with that. My coordination improved big time by starting to include movements like this into my training many, many years ago. And a lot of people tell me that when they do it, their military press improves, their squat improves, they feel better tied together. That's another phrase that I hear people independently say, like, I just feel better tied together, better energy, and it's free. So what's not to like about that? What I think is especially good is that it's a good introduction to my general methodology, which is make it convenient, make it effective, and make it fun. And so if you want to get a copy of it, all you have to do is go to 9minutechallenge.com. And it's the number 9minutechallenge.com. Incidentally, I do own the URL for 9minutechallenge.com, because I was on a different podcast and I specifically told the guy, I was like, it's number 9minutechallenge.com. And then absentmindedly, when he posted it, he put NINE-minutechallenge.com. So I was like, well, now I have to buy that URL and just like redirect it. So if you go to NINE-minute.com, challenge.com rather, you will still be sent there, but it'll allow you to get my free report of the 9-minute challenge. And I encourage people to test it out. If you've got a kettlebell or two, some free space, a little bit of true grit, you'll be in and out in no time. And I think you'll find it to be a lot of fun. And anybody who's interested, it'll also put you on my daily email list, which you are free to hang out on. You're free to leave immediately if you want to. You're free to stay as long as you want. And but it's a lot of fun. A lot of people tell me that they look forward to my emails first thing in the morning. I had one guy in Australia said that he makes his coffee and then he sits down and he reads my email of the day while he's enjoying his coffee. So, and incidentally, again, there's always an opportunity to buy something for those who are interested. No obligation to. It's a free email list. But since we've talked about business, I want people to at least know exactly what to expect, and to let them know that it's no hard feelings if you want to go someplace else. You don't like hearing from me every day. Maybe my voice has grated on you this entire podcast. And, you never know. So I encourage people to leave if they feel the need to. But otherwise, like I said, it's a lot of fun. 9minutechallenge.com is the best place to find me. I'm also on, again, we'll say the millennial social media networks like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube specifically. I have a LinkedIn as well. TikTok, no, like I said, I'm already addicted to all these other drugs,
Right.
the social media. So I didn't see a need to add heroin, to the mix. But otherwise, yeah, you're free to go to any of these places, check out my material. And if you like me, I'd love to hear from you. And if not, it's been a pleasure chatting anyway.
Awesome. So great. Thank you so much, Aleks.
Thank you for having me on.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.